My son said it gently, almost kindly. He stood in my living room, the same room where he took his first steps, and said, "You don't need the house anymore." I remember looking at the walls, the windows, the floor beneath my feet, and wondering how someone could say that to a woman who was still waking up there every morning. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just nodded because I didn't yet know what he had already done behind my back. What my son believed was that my life had grown smaller. What he didn't know was that I was still paying attention. And by the time the truth reached me, the house I was standing in no longer belonged to me. My name is Virginia Marsh, and I'm 74 years old. I've lived in the same house for 49 years, nearly half a century in one place, watching the world change around me while these four walls remained constant. Bought it with my late husband Gerald in 1975 when we were newlyweds, young and hopeful and convinced we were building something that would last forever. Back then, this neighborhood was brand new, raw land being carved into streets and lots. We were among the first families to move in, pioneers, according to the real estate agent who showed us the property, a bubbly woman named Sandra with frosted hair and optimism that seemed boundless. "You're not just buying a house," she told us, gesturing at the empty lots surrounding our future home. "You're investing in a community. In 5 years, this will be the most desirable neighborhood in the county." She was right, though it took longer than 5 years. The neighborhood filled in slowly young families like us, mostly people with small children and big dreams and mortgage that felt terrifying but manageable. We'd wave to each other from our driveways, share tools and recipes and babysitting duties, watch our kids play together in yards that were still more dirt than grass. The house itself is modest, a ranch-style home. Common for that era, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, about 1,500 square feet of living space, white aluminum siding that I've had repainted every decade or so though. It's been longer this time, probably. Due for another coat, soon green shutters that Gerald insisted on because he said they reminded him of his childhood home in Pennsylvania. A front porch just deep enough for 2 rocking chairs and a small table where I've spent countless evenings watching the sun set over the neighborhood. The inside has changed over the years. As houses do, we started with shag carpeting harvest gold in the living room, I'm embarrassed to admit now, and wood paneling in the den that was very fashionable at the time. The kitchen had avocado green appliances and formica countertops with a pattern that looked like someone had spilled confetti and then sealed it in plastic. We updated things as we could afford it, new carpet in the 80s. Replaced the kitchen countertops in the 90s, went with a nice neutral granite that still looks good today. Refinished the hardwood floors that were hiding under all that carpet. Painted over the wood paneling, small improvements, one at a time as money and energy allowed. But some things never changed, the layout remained the same. The bones of the house, the foundation, the frame, the essential structure, all original. The crack in the corner of the master bedroom ceiling that appeared during the big earthquake in '89, and that we never bothered to fix because it didn't seem to be getting worse. The slightly uneven floorboard in the hallway that creaks when you step on it, a sound so familiar, it's become part of the house's personality. This is where Gerald and I raised our 2 sons. Michael came first born in 1973, when we were still living in a cramped apartment and saving every penny for a down payment. David followed 3 years later, arriving just 6 months after we'd moved into this house. I remember bringing him home from the hospital, walking through that front door with a newborn in my arms, thinking how perfect it was that his first home would be this house where he'd grow up. And they did grow up here, both of them. This living room where Michael stood last month telling me I didn't need the house anymore, this was where he took his first steps, right there between the couch and the coffee table that's long since been replaced. He was 10 months old, chubby-legged and determined, letting go of the couch and wobbling 3 steps before falling onto his padded bottom and laughing with delight. This was where we put up Christmas trees every year, where the boys would race downstairs on Christmas morning to see what Santa had brought, where we'd take family photos that now sit in albums gathering dust in the hallway closet, where we celebrated birthdays and graduations and every milestone that marks a life being lived. The kitchen was where I taught both boys to cook, where we'd do homework at the table while I made dinner, where Gerald would sit with his coffee every morning reading the newspaper and humming tunelessly to himself, where the boys would bring their friends after school and raid the refrigerator and leave crumbs everywhere and fill the house with noise and life. The backyard was Gerald's domain. He put in a vegetable garden the second summer we lived here, started with tomatoes, his pride and joy, and gradually expanded to include peppers, cucumbers, zucchini, green beans. He'd spend hours out there tending his plants like they were his children. The boys would help sometimes when they were little, though. Their help usually consisted of getting dirty and eating cherry tomatoes straight off the vine. There's a patch of concrete near the back fence where you can still see handprints, Michael's and David's, pressed into the wet cement when Gerald was pouring a small patio extension. They were 8 and 5. Gerald had planned to smooth it out, but when he saw their handprints, their little fingers spread wide, he decided to leave them. "So we'll always remember when they were this small," he said. "Those handprints are still there. The boys' hands have grown so much since then. Michael's are bigger than Gerald's were, but there in the concrete they're forever children." Gerald died 7 years ago this past April, massive stroke. He was in the garden naturally. It was a Saturday morning, mild and sunny, perfect spring weather. I was inside making a grocery list, planning to go shopping after lunch. I heard a sound later. I'd realize it was him falling, but at the time, I thought maybe he'd dropped a tool or knocked over a plant pot. I went out to check. Maybe 10 minutes later, found him lying between the tomato plants, the soil still damp from where he'd been watering. His eyes were open but unseeing. His right hand was still gripping the handle of the garden hose. The paramedic said he was probably gone before he hit the ground, said it was quick, that he didn't suffer. I've held on to that over the years, held on to the idea that his last moments were spent doing something he loved in a place that made him happy on a beautiful spring morning. He was 69. We'd been married for 44 years. The house felt enormous. After he died, empty in a way it had never felt before, even after the boys moved out, because when the boys left, Gerald was still here, still humming in the kitchen, still tending his garden, still filling the space with his quiet presence. Without him, the silence was overwhelming. People told me I should sell, that the house was too big for one person, that it would be too sad, too full of memories, too painful to stay, but I couldn't leave, couldn't imagine waking up anywhere else. This house was the last place Gerald and I were together, the last place where our life as it had been still existed, at least in memory. So I stayed, learned to live alone, learned to sleep in a bed that felt too big, learned to cook for one, learned to maintain a house and a yard by myself, hiring help for the things I couldn't do. It wasn't easy. There were nights when the loneliness was crushing, days when I'd find myself talking to Gerald as if he were still here, updating him on the neighborhood gossip or asking his opinion about whether to replace the water heater, but there were good days, 2 days, when I'd work in the garden, continuing what he'd started. Days when I'd bake his favorite recipes and share them with neighbors. Days when I'd sit on the porch and feel grateful for this house, this life, these memories. My sons visited regularly in those first years after their father died. Michael would come by twice a month, David slightly less often. They'd check on me, help with repairs, take me out to lunch. We'd talk about their families, their work, their lives. It was pleasant, comforting. But somewhere along the way, the nature of their visits changed. It started subtly, maybe 2 years ago, little comments that seemed innocuous at first. "Mom, this house is really too much for you to handle alone. Have you thought about what you'd do if you fell and no one was around? The yard looks like it needs work. Are you keeping up with the maintenance?" I'd brush off the comments, tell them I was fine, that yes, the house was big, but I was managing that. Yes, I was getting older, but I was still capable. That yes, maintaining everything was work, but it was work I was willing to do. But the comments continued, increased in frequency, became less subtle. "David and I have been talking. We're worried about you living out here alone. What if something happens? What if you have a fall and can't get to a phone? This house is worth a lot of money now. You could sell it and move somewhere smaller, easier to manage." I began to dread their visits. What had once been time with my sons became sessions where I had to defend my choices, justify my independence, prove I was still competent. About 18 months ago, Michael started bringing brochures for retirement communities, senior living facilities, active adult communities with names designed to sound appealing. Golden Meadows, Serenity Pines, Evergreen Estates. "Just look at them," he'd say, leaving them on my kitchen counter. "No pressure. Just keep an open mind." I'd flip through them after he left, glossy pages full of stock photos, silver-haired people smiling while doing crafts, playing cards, eating meals in communal dining rooms. Everything looked clean and bright and cheerful in an artificial way that made me feel sad. The apartments were small studio or one-bedroom units. The promotional materials made much of the maintenance-free lifestyle and worry-free living. Everything provided meals, activities, housekeeping, medical care if needed. It looked like giving up, like admitting you couldn't handle real life anymore, like trading independence for convenience. I threw the brochures away. Every time Michael brought new ones, I'd wait until he left and then toss them in the recycling bin, but he kept bringing them and he kept pushing. "Mom, you need to start thinking seriously about this. You're not getting any younger. What happens when you can't drive anymore? How will you get groceries? Get to doctor's appointments? These places have waiting lists. If you wait until you actually need one, it might be too late." I tried explaining that I wasn't ready, that I was happy in my house, that I'd consider moving when I felt I couldn't manage anymore, but that time hadn't come yet. "That's the problem," Michael said. "People always wait too long. They think they're fine until suddenly they're not, and then it's a crisis. We're trying to help you avoid that. I appreciate the concern, but I'm fine right now. When I'm not fine anymore, we'll revisit this conversation." But Michael didn't want to wait. The pressure increased. He started visiting more frequently, once a week instead of twice a month, and the visits always included some version of the same conversation. "You're being stubborn. You're not thinking clearly about this. David and I are worried sick about you." David, for his part, seemed less invested in the campaign. He'd nod along when Michael talked, but he rarely initiated the conversations himself. I got the impression he was going along with his older brother's concerns without really sharing them to the same degree. Then, about 4 months ago, things shifted again. Michael showed up on a Tuesday afternoon, unusual since he typically visited on weekends. He had a manila folder with him and a serious expression. "Mom, I need you to look at something." We sat at the dining room table. He pulled papers from the folder and spread them out in front of me. "David and I have been consulting with an estate planning attorney. We want to make sure all your legal affairs are in order. I have a will. Your father and I had everything set up years ago. Those documents are probably outdated. Estate law has changed, and there are things you should have in place that you probably don't. Healthcare directives, power of attorney, trust arrangements." "I don't need a trust. I don't have that kind of money." "It's not just about money, Mom. It's about making sure everything is handled properly if something happens to you. Making sure David and I can make decisions on your behalf if you're not able to." The papers in front of me looked official legal language I didn't fully understand. Multiple pages with tabs marking where I needed to sign. What exactly are these documents? Power of attorney papers, healthcare directives, some trust documents to protect your assets. The attorney drew them all up. He said everyone your age should have these things in place. Michael walked me through each document, pointing to the signature lines. There were a lot of them. He explained what each paper was for, or at least what he said each paper was for. "This one gives David and me the ability to make healthcare decisions if you're incapacitated. This one allows us to manage your finances if you're unable to. This one sets up a trust to protect the house and your other assets." It all sounded reasonable, responsible, even the kind of thing a prudent person should do. "Don't you think I should have my own attorney look at these first?" I asked. Michael's expression flickered just for a second, something that might have been annoyance or impatience, but then he smiled. "Of course you can. But Mom, we paid a lot of money for an attorney to draw these up specifically for you. They're standard documents. Every estate attorney would tell you the same thing. Still, I'd feel more comfortable. Look, if you want to spend money having another attorney review them, that's your choice. But that'll take weeks, and in the meantime you don't have any of these protections in place. What if something happens in the meantime? What if you have a health emergency and we can't make decisions for you because the paperwork isn't filed?" I hesitated. He was right that I should have these things in place. Gerald and I had always meant to update our documents after he died, but I'd been putting it off. And Michael and David were my sons, my own children. If I couldn't trust them, who could I trust? "Okay," I said. "Where do I sign?" Michael showed me page after page, each with a sticky tab marking my signature line. I signed them all, dated them, initialed where indicated. I didn't read them carefully. I should have. I know that now, but they were dense legal documents full of party of the first part, and hereinafter referred to as, and complex clauses that would have taken hours to parse, and I trusted my son. When I finished signing, Michael gathered all the papers and put them back in his folder. "I'll file these with the county and get copies back to you," he said. "Okay." He gave me a hug before he left. "You did the right thing, Mom. This is going to make everything so much easier when the time comes." After he left, I felt unsettled, couldn't quite identify why, just a nagging sense that something wasn't right, but I pushed it down, told myself I was being paranoid, that Michael was helping me, not hurting me, that I should be grateful to have sons who cared enough to make sure these things were handled properly. I didn't think about those papers again for almost a month. Then I got a phone call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday morning, early October. The weather was just starting to turn cool. I was having my coffee on the porch watching the neighbor's cat hunt in the bushes when my cell phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer so many spam calls these days, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Marsh? Virginia Marsh? Yes? This is Linda Chun from Evergreen Insurance. I'm calling about your homeowner's insurance policy, okay? We're calling to confirm the cancellation of your policy effective October 1st. We wanted to make sure you received the notice and that you've secured coverage elsewhere. My stomach dropped. I didn't cancel my policy. Oh, well, according to our records, we received notification that the property at 428 Maple Drive was sold, so the policy was no longer needed. Sold? I didn't sell my house. A pause. Let me pull up the account. One moment. I could hear typing. My heart was beating too fast. This had to be a mistake, some clerical error. Mrs. Marsh, our records show that ownership of the property transferred to a Michael Marsh on September 15th. Is that incorrect? Michael is my son. But I didn't sell him the house. I see. According to the county recorder's office, the deed transferred on that date. Perhaps you should contact them directly. Or speak with Mr. Marsh? Yes, I'll do that. Thank you. I hung up, sat there on my porch in the cool morning air, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. The house had been transferred to Michael? When? How? I went inside, found my laptop, logged into the county recorder's website. It took me a while to navigate. I'm not great with computers, but eventually I found what I was looking for: the property deed for 428 Maple Drive, recently updated. Transferred from Virginia Marsh to Michael Marsh. Date of transfer September 15th, 3 weeks ago, right around the time I'd signed all those papers. I stared at the screen, read it again and again, hoping I'd misunderstood, hoping it was a different address or a different Michael Marsh or some kind of technical glitch. But no, it was my house, my address, my son. I called Michael immediately. It went to voicemail. Michael, this is Mom. I need you to call me back right away. It's important. He didn't call back that day or the next. On Thursday, I drove to the county recorder's office myself. It's downtown in the basement of the county courthouse. I had to park 3 blocks away and walk. My hip was bothering me, making each step a small challenge. The recorder's office was busy. I took a number and waited 40 minutes before my turn came. I need to see the deed for my property, I told the clerk, a young man with a name tag that said Josh. Sure, what's the address? I gave it to him. He typed into his computer, then turned the screen toward me. This one? Yes. He printed out several pages, the current deed showing the property in Michael's name, and several pages behind it, the actual transfer documents, including a quitclaim deed signed by me, dated September 10th. I stared at my signature. It was definitely mine, my handwriting, but I didn't remember signing a deed. Can I see all the documents that were filed that day? I asked. Josh printed them out: power of attorney forms, healthcare directives, trust documents, and buried in the middle, the quitclaim deed transferring my property to Michael. I sat down in one of the plastic chairs in the waiting area, papers in my lap, trying to breathe. Normally those papers Michael had brought me, the ones he said were just standard estate planning documents, the ones I'd signed without reading carefully because I trusted him. One of them had been a deed transferring my house to him, and I'd signed. It put my name on the dotted line, given away my home without even realizing it. I felt sick, dizzy, betrayed. My son had tricked me, lied to me, stolen my house. No, not stolen. I'd given it to him, signed it over willingly, if unknowingly. I drove home in a daze. The house looked the same as always, white siding, green shutters, the chrysanthemums I'd planted by the mailbox blooming cheerfully, but it wasn't mine anymore. I went inside, walked through the rooms, slowly touching things, the wall in the hallway, the kitchen counter, the bedroom door frame, trying to memorize the feel of them as if they might disappear. This house that had been mine for 49 years belonged to my son now. Why? What was his plan? I didn't have to wait long to find out. That Friday evening, Michael and David showed up together. No phone call first, just appeared at my door. "We need to talk, Mom." I let them in. They settled on the couch in the living room. I sat in the armchair across from them, hands folded in my lap. "Mom, David and I have been doing a lot of thinking," Michael began. "About your situation. About what's best for you, what's best for me. You've been alone in this house for 7 years now. That's a long time. And while you've managed well, we think it's time to make a change." "What kind of change?" David cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable. "We've secured you a spot at Serenity Pines. It's a really nice place, Mom. We went and toured it. You'd have your own apartment. Meals provided. Activities. Other people your age to socialize with. You secured me a spot? Without asking me?" "We knew you'd resist," Michael said. "You've been resisting the idea for years. But it's time, Mom. This house is too much for you. You're getting older. Your hip bothers you. Your eyesight isn't what it used to be. What if you fell? What if you had a medical emergency? I have a medical alert button. That's not enough. You need to be somewhere safe. Somewhere with people around. Somewhere that can provide care if you need it." "I don't need care. I'm perfectly capable of living independently." "For now," Michael said. "But that could change at any moment. And we don't want to wait for a crisis. We want you settled somewhere appropriate before that happens." I looked at David. "Is this what you want too?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I think it's a good idea, Mom. Michael's right that you shouldn't be alone. And the house?" Michael and David exchanged a glance. "We're going to sell it," Michael said. "The market's strong right now. Properties in this neighborhood are selling well above asking price. We should be able to get a good price. The money will go toward your care at Serenity Pines, and anything left over will be split between David and me." I felt cold numb. "You're going to sell my house and keep the money?" "It's not your house anymore, Mom. Legally, it's mine. And yes, we're going to sell it. It's the smart thing to do." "When did you plan to tell me this?" "We're telling you now." "After you'd already transferred the deed. After you'd already made all the decisions without my input. Because we knew you wouldn't agree. We knew you'd fight us on this." "But Mom, we're doing this for your own good." I stood up. "Get out. Mom, get out of my house. Both of you." "It's not your house," Michael said again. His voice was harder now, less gentle. "Legally, I own it. And I'm giving you until the end of the month to pack your belongings. Then we're putting it on the market. You can't do this." "We already have." They left. Michael turned back at the door. "You have until the end of the month to pack. After that, we're putting the house on the market whether you're ready or not." The door closed behind them. I stood in my living room, the room where Michael took his first steps, where we'd celebrated countless Christmases, where Gerald and I had slow danced on our anniversary when the boys were grown and the house was quiet, and I felt my entire world crumbling. That night I couldn't sleep, lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The same ceiling I'd stared at for nearly 50 years, watching the shadows from the Streetlight move across the plaster, listening to the house settle and creak in familiar ways. By morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to let this happen, wasn't going to let my sons steal my home and my independence, wasn't going to go quietly into some facility because it was more convenient for them. I was going to fight back. I called my neighbor, Dorothy Harrison. She'd lived next door for 30 years. We'd raised our children together, weathered storms together, become the kind of friends who don't need constant contact to maintain connection. Dorothy, I need help. What's wrong? I told her everything, the papers, the deed transfer, Michael's plan to force me into Serenity Pines and sell the house. When I finished, there was a long silence, then Dorothy said one word, bastard. I'd never heard her curse before, in 3 decades of friendship, not once. Can they do this? I asked, legally? I don't know, but I know someone who will. Give me an hour. 50 minutes later, Dorothy called back with a name and number. Patricia Chun, an attorney who specialized in elder law and financial abuse. She can see you Monday morning, 10 o'clock. I'll go with you. That Monday, Dorothy and I sat in Patricia Chen's office, a bright modern space with plants in the corners and abstract art on the walls. Patricia was probably in her late 40s with kind eyes and an air of quiet competence. I told her my story, showed her the papers I'd signed, showed her the deed transfer from the county recorder's office. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers. Mrs. Marsh, what your sons did is called undue influence. It's a form of fraud. They use their position of trust as your children to manipulate you into signing documents you didn't fully understand. But I did sign them. My signature is right there. Yes, but the question is whether you understood what you were signing. Your son told you these were estate planning documents, correct? Power of attorney forms? Yes. But he didn't specifically tell you that you were signing a deed transferring ownership of your house to him. No, if he had, I never would have signed. That's undue influence. It's fraud. And it's illegal. Hope flickered in my chest. So I can get my house back? Possibly. We'll need to file a lawsuit to set aside the deed transfer. We'll argue that you didn't understand what you were signing, that your son misrepresented the documents, and that the transfer should be voided. How long will that take? Months at minimum. Possibly longer, depending on how aggressively your son fights it. And I should warn you, this won't be easy. These cases can be emotionally difficult, especially when family is involved. I don't care. This is my home. I've lived here for 49 years. I'm not giving it up without a fight. Patricia smiled. Then let's get started. Over the next week, Patricia prepared the lawsuit. I gathered documentation, bank statements showing I'd been managing my own finances competently, medical records showing I had no cognitive impairment, letters from friends attesting to my mental sharpness. We filed the lawsuit the following Monday. Michael was served with papers that Wednesday. He called within an hour of being served. He was furious. What do you think you're doing? Getting my house back? You can't do this. Those documents are legal. You signed them willingly. You lied to me about what they were. I did no such thing. I told you they were estate planning documents. Which they were. You told me they were power of attorney forms. You didn't tell me I was signing a deed. You should have read what you were signing. That stung because it was true. I should have read them, should have asked more questions, should have had my own attorney review everything, but I'd trusted my son. You took advantage of that trust, I said. You manipulated me. We were trying to help you, trying to make sure you were taken care of. By stealing my house? We didn't steal anything. God, Mom, why are you being so difficult? We're trying to do what's best for you, and you're fighting us every step of the way. What's best for me is to live in my own home for as long as I'm able. You're not able. You're 74 years old. You can barely maintain that house. Something's going to happen. You're going to fall or have a health crisis, or that's my risk to take. No, it's not. Because when something happens, David and I will be the ones who have to deal with it. We'll be the ones who have to drop everything to take care of you. I haven't asked you to take care of me. You won't have to ask. We're your sons. It'll be our responsibility. And we're trying to be smart about this. Trying to plan ahead so we're not dealing with a crisis. You're trying to profit from my house while I'm still alive to see it. Silence then. That money was going to be ours eventually anyway. There it was, the truth he hadn't meant to say. Goodbye, Michael. I hung up. The next few weeks were difficult. Michael and David tried various tactics to pressure me into dropping the lawsuit. They'd show up at my house unannounced, Michael more than David. David seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the whole situation. They'd demand to be let in. When I refused, they'd shout through the door, "You're going to lose everything fighting this. The legal fees are going to drain whatever money you have left. You're tearing this family apart." I documented everything, kept a log of every visit, every phone call, every text message. Patricia had advised me to keep records of any harassment or intimidation. They also tried a different approach, turning other people against me. Michael called my sister Janet, who lives in Florida, told her I was being irrational, that I was refusing help and putting myself at risk, that he was worried about my mental state. Janet called me concerned. "Virginia, Michael says you're being difficult about moving to a retirement community. Michael is trying to force me out of my house so he can sell it." "That's not what he said. He said you signed papers agreeing to the move, and now you're having second thoughts." "That's not true. He tricked me into signing a deed, transferring the house to him. I'm suing to get it back." "Oh, Virginia, you're suing your own son? He stole my house." "I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. Michael's always been such a good boy. He wouldn't do something like that. But he had, and the fact that even my own sister didn't believe me made the betrayal worse somehow. Michael also tried to get my doctor involved, called my physician's office, claiming he was worried about my cognitive function, said I was making irrational decisions and needed to be evaluated. My doctor, Dr. Reynolds, who I'd been seeing for 20 years, called me in for an appointment. "Virginia, I got an unusual call from your son. He's concerned about your mental state." "There's nothing wrong with my mental state. He's trying to discredit me because I'm suing him." Dr. Reynolds looked at me carefully. "What's going on?" I explained the whole situation. When I finished, she nodded. "I'll note in your chart that I've evaluated you and found no signs of cognitive impairment. If this goes to court, I'll testify to that if needed." "Thank you. And Virginia? Your son is wrong. You're perfectly capable of making your own decisions. Small victories, but they mattered." The court date was set for 6 weeks out. Patricia worked tirelessly building our case. We had medical evidence showing I was competent, financial records showing I managed my money responsibly, testimony from friends and neighbors about my mental sharpness, and most importantly, we had my testimony about what Michael had told me versus what the papers actually said. Michael had his own lawyer, of course, a slick corporate attorney named Gregory Winters, who wore expensive suits and radiated confidence. The hearing was held on a gray November morning. The courthouse felt oppressive, all marble and dark wood, and the weight of justice. We sat at tables facing the judge, who was a woman in her early 60s named Judge Martinez. She had a reputation for being fair but tough. Both sides presented their arguments. Gregory Winters argued that I was a competent adult who'd signed legal documents voluntarily, that I'd had ample opportunity to read what I was signing, that I was simply experiencing buyer's remorse. Patricia argued that I'd been manipulated, that Michael had used his position as my son to gain my trust, then abused that trust by misrepresenting what the documents contained, that I'd believed I was signing estate planning paperwork, not transferring ownership of my home. Then came testimony. I took the stand first. Patricia asked me questions, gentle ones designed to let me tell my story in my own words. I explained how Michael had brought the papers, how he'd assured me they were standard estate planning documents, how he'd pointed to signature lines and I'd signed without reading carefully because I trusted him. Did you understand you were signing a deed transferring your house to your son? Patricia asked. No. If I'd known that, I never would have signed. What did you think you were signing? Power of attorney forms, healthcare directives, documents that would let my sons help me if I got sick, but that wouldn't change ownership of my property. Gregory Winters cross-examined me. He was less gentle. Mrs. Marsh, you're an educated woman, are you not? I have a high school diploma. You can read and write? Of course. You've signed legal documents before. Mortgage papers when you bought the house? Your husband's will? Yes. So you understand the importance of reading documents before you sign them? Yes. Then why didn't you read these documents carefully? I took a breath. Because my son told me what they were, and I trusted him. But isn't it true, Mrs. Marsh, that you bear some responsibility for not reading what you signed? Patricia objected. Judge Martinez sustained it, but the point had been made. I should have been more careful. Gregory Winters continued. Isn't it true that your son had been suggesting for months that you should consider moving to a retirement community? Yes. And isn't it true that you'd looked at brochures for these communities? He brought me brochures. I looked at them, yes. So the idea of transitioning out of your house wasn't completely foreign to you? I looked at the brochures to make him happy. I never agreed to move. But you did agree to sign estate planning documents? Yes. Documents that your son explained were designed to protect you and plan for your future? He said they were power of attorney documents. Did he ever specifically say, these documents do not include a deed transfer? No, but so you made an assumption about what was in the documents rather than reading them yourself. I trusted my son to tell me the truth. But trust doesn't absolve you of the responsibility to read what you sign, does it? I couldn't answer without admitting he was right. When I stepped down from the witness stand, I felt defeated. Gregory Winters had made me look careless, irresponsible, like I had only myself to blame. Then Michael took the stand. Patricia's cross-examination was methodical and devastating. Mr. Marsh, you testified that you told your mother these were estate planning documents. Can you be more specific about what you told her? I told her they were power of attorney forms, healthcare directives, things like that. Did you tell her that one of the documents was a quitclaim deed transferring ownership of her house to you? I may have mentioned it. May have? Do you remember mentioning it or not? It was several weeks ago. I don't remember the exact conversation. But you do remember your mother signing the documents? Yes. Did she seem to understand what she was signing? She's a smart woman. I assumed she understood. You assumed. But did you specifically explain that she was transferring ownership of her house to you? Michael shifted in his seat. I explained that we were reorganizing her assets to make things easier to manage. That's not what I asked. Did you tell her in clear language that she was giving you her house? A long pause. Not in those exact words. What words did you use? I told her we were getting her legal affairs in order, and you didn't think it was important. To clarify that getting her legal affairs in order included her giving you ownership of the house she'd lived in for 49 years? I thought she understood what she was signing. Or did you deliberately avoid clarifying because you knew she wouldn't sign if she understood? Objection, Gregory Winters said. Speculation. Withdrawn, Patricia said. Mr. Marsh, what do you plan to do with the house once the property sells? Split the proceeds with my brother. And how much do you estimate the house is worth? In the current market, probably $400,000. So you and your brother stand to gain $200,000 each by selling your mother's house? That money will be used to pay for her care at Serenity Pines, which costs approximately $3,000 a month. So in the first year, $36,000 would go to her care. What happens to the remaining $164,000? That would be split between my brother and myself. So this isn't really about protecting your mother or ensuring she's cared for. This is about you and your brother inheriting money while your mother is still alive. That's not we're trying to help her. You're trying to help yourself to her assets while bypassing the inconvenience of waiting for her to die. Objection. Gregory Winters was on his feet. Judge Martinez sustained it, but the damage was done, the truth was out. After both sides rested, Judge Martinez said she'd take the matter under advisement and issue a ruling within 30 days. However, she added, looking at Michael, I'm issuing a temporary restraining order preventing the sale of the property. Until this matter is resolved, Mr. Marsh, you are not to list, sell, or otherwise dispose of the property at 428 Maple Drive until further notice. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Michael said, his jaw tight. We left the courthouse. Dorothy and Patricia walked with me to my car. How do you think it went? I asked Patricia. I think the judge saw through your son's motives. But these cases can be unpredictable. We'll know more when she issues her ruling. The 30-day wait was excruciating. Every day felt like a week. I'd wake up wondering if today would be the day. I'd check my phone constantly jump every time it rang. Michael and David stayed away during this time. No calls, no visits, no harassment. Their lawyer had probably advised them to keep their distance. I spent the time making peace with all possible outcomes. If I won, I'd get my house back. If I lost, I'd have to figure out my next steps. But at least I'd know I'd fought. Dorothy came over most evenings. We'd sit on the porch, even though it was getting cold, wrapped in blankets, drinking tea, watching the neighborhood settle in for the night. Regardless of what happens, she said one evening, I'm proud of you. You stood up for yourself. A lot of people in your situation would have just accepted it. I couldn't accept it. This house is too important to me. I know. But it takes courage to fight your own children, did it? I wasn't sure. Mostly it just felt necessary. On day 27, Patricia called. I have the ruling. My heart stopped. And Judge Martinez ruled in your favor. She found that Michael engaged in undue influence and fraud. The deed transfer is being set aside. The house is yours again. I had to sit down. My legs wouldn't hold me. Are you sure? I'm reading the order right now. The judge was pretty clear. She said that while you did sign the documents, Michael deliberately misled you about what they contained. She found his testimony about not remembering whether he'd explained the deed transfer to be not credible, and she noted that the financial benefit to him and his brother suggested that this was more about their interests than yours. So the house is mine? The house is yours. Michael will have to sign a quitclaim deed transferring it back to you. If he refuses, the court will execute the transfer anyway. Either way, within 2 weeks, you'll have clear title. Again, after I hung up, I walked through my house room by room, touched. The walls looked out the windows, stood in the kitchen where Gerald used to make his coffee, mine's still mine. Dorothy came over within minutes, and we celebrated with tea and cookies and relief. What are you going to do now? She asked. Live my life. In my house. On my terms. The legal transfer took 10 days. Michael signed the papers. I'm sure his lawyer advised him he had no choice. I didn't hear from him directly. But a week after the house was back in my name, David showed up at my door. He looked terrible, thinner than I'd seen him in years, dark circles under his eyes. Can I come in? I hesitated, then stepped aside. We sat in the living room. The silence was heavy with everything unsaid. Finally, David spoke. I owe you an apology. A real one. I waited. I went along with Michael's plan because it seemed easier than arguing with him. Michael has always been the leader, the decision maker. And I've always been the one who goes along. But that doesn't excuse what I did. What we did? No, it doesn't. I didn't understand how wrong it was until the hearing. Listening to the testimony. Hearing the judge's ruling. It made me see that we weren't helping you. We were helping ourselves. Yes. Michael convinced me that we were doing the right thing. That you were declining and didn't see it. That we needed to intervene before something bad happened. But that wasn't true, was it? No, I'm managing fine. I see that now. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry we violated your trust. I'm sorry we tried to take your home. I'm sorry we put our financial interests ahead of your autonomy. I looked at my younger son. He'd always been the follower, the peacekeeper. Always deferred to his older brother to avoid conflict. But he was here now, apologizing, taking responsibility. That meant something. What about Michael? Does he feel the same way? David shook his head. Michael is angry. He feels like you embarrassed him. Made him look bad in front of a judge. He's not ready to admit he was wrong. Then I can't have a relationship with him. Not until he understands what he did and why it was wrong. I understand. But me? Is there any chance we could, I don't know, try to rebuild? I thought about it. If you're serious about making amends, if you're willing to respect my independence and my choices, if you can prove over time that you see me as a capable adult, not a problem to be managed, then maybe. I'd like that. I want to try. Then let's start small. Coffee once a month. We'll see how it goes. Okay, thank you, Mom. Over the following months, David and I slowly rebuilt our relationship. It wasn't easy. There was still hurt and mistrust on both sides, but we worked at it. He started asking me about my life instead of telling me how to live it, asked about my volunteer work at the library, about the book club I'd joined, about my garden and my plans for spring planting. He stopped suggesting I should move or questioning my ability to manage my own affairs, started treating me like an adult capable of making my own decisions. It wasn't perfect. Old patterns would resurface sometimes. He'd catch himself mid-sentence about to suggest something I should do and stop, apologize, rephrase to make it a question instead of a directive. But the effort was there, the respect was there, and slowly trust began to rebuild. As for Michael, I didn't hear from him. Months passed with no contact. I thought about reaching out, but I wasn't ready, and clearly neither was he. Then, about 8 months after the court ruling, I got a letter in the mail, Michael's handwriting on the envelope. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity won. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Mom, I've been in therapy. Court ordered at first because of the judge's finding of financial exploitation. But I've kept going even after the required sessions ended because I needed to understand why I did what I did. I've spent months talking about my relationship with you, about Dad, about control and money and fear of the future, about how I convinced myself that I knew what was best for you better than you knew yourself." The therapist asked me a question that I couldn't answer. What gave me the right to make decisions for a capable adult without her consent? I didn't have a good answer. I still don't. I'm writing because I want you to know that I understand now what I did wrong. I violated your trust. I treated you like you were incompetent when you weren't. I prioritized my own financial interests and my need to control the situation over your autonomy and your clearly expressed wishes. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't expect you to ever trust me again. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I understand. I'm sorry, Mom, for all of it. Michael, I read that letter 3 times, then I put it in a drawer. I wasn't ready to respond, might never be ready. The wound was still too fresh. But I kept the letter because someday maybe I'd want to remember that Michael had at least tried to understand, had at least acknowledged what he'd done. That was something, maybe not enough, but something. Now, almost a year since that day, Michael stood in my living room and told me I didn't need the house anymore. I'm still here, still waking up in the same bedroom. I've slept in for 49 years, still making coffee in the same kitchen, still working in the garden Gerald started. My sons thought my life had grown smaller, thought living alone in this house meant I was declining, diminishing, becoming less capable, but they were wrong. My life is exactly the size I want it to be, small, maybe by some measures quiet, centered around this house and this neighborhood and the routines I've built over decades, but it's mine, my life, my choices, my home. I've learned something important through all of this. Being old doesn't mean being incompetent. Choosing a simple life doesn't mean being unable to handle a complex one. Living alone doesn't mean being lonely or helpless or in need of rescue. I'm 74 years old. I know my own mind. I know what I want and what I don't want, and I have the right to make those decisions for myself, regardless of what my children think is best for me. This house isn't just a building. It's my history, my memories, the place where I became who I am, where I raised my family, where I loved my husband, where I grieved him, where I learned to be alone and found that being alone doesn't mean being lonely. Michael said I didn't need it anymore, as if need was purely practical, as if having too many empty rooms or a yard that requires maintenance outweighed everything else this place means to me. But he was wrong. I do need this house, not because I can't physically live somewhere else, but because this is where I belong, where my life makes sense, where I feel most myself and no one. Not my sons, not a judge, not anyone has the right to take that from me. I'll live here as long as I'm able, and when the day comes that I truly can't manage anymore, when I need more care than I can provide for myself, I'll make that decision, me, not my children, not anyone else. My life, my home, my choice, and I'm never signing that away again. Dorothy comes over most evenings now. We sit on my porch, even in cold weather, bundled in blankets, drinking tea, watching the neighborhood. We've become closer through all of this, bonded by the battle we fought together. No regrets? She asked me one evening last week. About fighting for my house? None, not about the house. About Michael. About the possibility that you might never reconcile. I thought about that. I regret what he did. I regret that our relationship is broken. But I don't regret standing up for myself. Even if it cost me my son, that's a high price. So is giving up everything that matters to you just to keep the peace. She nodded. We sat in comfortable silence watching the sun set over the houses across the street. My neighbor Tom was mowing his lawn, his wife Sarah was watering their flower beds, normal suburban evening activities, the kind of ordinary moments that make up a life. This is what I would have lost, not just the physical structure of my house, but my place in this community. My routines, my independence, my right to live my life on my own terms. Michael thought he was saving me from something, but what he was really trying to save was himself, from worry, from responsibility, from the uncertainty of having an aging parent who insisted on maintaining her independence. He wanted me managed, contained place somewhere he could stop worrying about me, but I don't need to be managed. I need to be respected, trusted, allowed to make my own choices and live with the consequences. I'm still here, still capable, still paying attention, and I'm not going anywhere. Last week, I did something I'd been putting off. I went to see Patricia Chun again. I want to update my legal documents, I told her. Properly this time. With complete understanding of what I'm signing. That's a good idea. I want a will that's crystal clear. I want healthcare directives. I want power of attorney documents that specify exactly what authority I'm granting and under what circumstances. And who do you want to designate as your agent? I'd thought about this. Dorothy. She's shown me that she respects my autonomy. That she advocate for my wishes, not override them with what she thinks is best. Patricia nodded. We can do that. We spent 2 hours going through every document. Patricia explained every clause, every provision, every implication. I asked questions until I understood completely. This time I knew exactly what I was signing. This time I was protecting myself not just from strangers, but from well-meaning family, who might think they know better than I do what I need. The document specified that I wanted to remain in my home as long as possible, that I wanted medical decisions made according to my wishes, not someone else's judgment of what I would want, that I wanted my property to remain mine until I died, not transferred to anyone while I was still living. This is very clear, Patricia said when we finished. There's no ambiguity. No wiggle room for someone to reinterpret your wishes. Good, that's what I want. I keep those documents in a safe deposit box at the bank. Dorothy has a key. No one else. I've also done other things to protect myself, set up automatic bill payments so no one can claim I'm not managing my finances, installed a medical alert system that calls Dorothy first if I fall, made sure my doctor has clear instructions about my care wishes. I'm preparing for my own future, but on my terms with my choices, not someone else's plan for me. Spring came early this year. By March the daffodils were blooming. Gerald's garden, my garden, now came back to life. I spent hours out there digging in the soil, planting tomatoes and peppers, and all the things Gerald used to grow. My hands in the earth, the sun warm on my shoulders, doing something I love in the place I love. This is what I would have lost if Michael had succeeded. Not just the house, but the ability to continue the traditions Gerald and I built together to care for the garden. He started to watch things grow in soil we've tended for nearly 50 years. One afternoon in April, I was outside planting when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked up and saw David getting out. He came around to the backyard, hands in his pockets, looking uncertain. "I brought you something," he said. He went back to his car and returned carrying a flat of Plant's heirloom tomatoes, the same variety Gerald used to grow. "I remembered Dad always planted these," David said. "Thought you might want them for this year's garden." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Thank you." We planted them together side by side in the afternoon sun, not talking much, just working with the soil and the plants and the quiet companionship of shared purpose. When we finished, David helped me water everything. Then we sat on the back porch drinking lemonade, looking at the garden. "It looks good, Mom." "It does. Dad would be happy you're keeping it going." "I think so too." David was quiet for a moment then. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you think you'll ever forgive Michael?" "I thought about that. I don't know. Maybe someday. If he keeps doing the work. If he shows over time that he really understands what he did wrong. But I'm not there yet. He asks about you. Wants to know how you're doing. You can tell him I'm fine. Better than fine. I'm happy. In this house?" "Yes, in this house. Where I belong." David nodded. "I'll tell him." After he left, I stayed on the porch for a while, watching the shadows lengthen across the yard. The tomato plants we'd just planted looked small and vulnerable, but they'd grow. By summer, they'd be tall and heavy with fruit. Everything grows in its own time. Gardens trust healing. I'm not in a hurry. I have time, I have my home, I have my life, and for now, that's enough. Well, dear ones, thank you for staying with me through this long story. I know it was a difficult one to hear. These stories about family betrayal always cut deep, but I hope it reminded you of something important. You have the right to control your own life no matter how old you are. No one, not your children. Not anyone has the right to make decisions for you without your consent. If this story touched you, I'd be so grateful if you'd hit that like button down below. It helps other people find these stories, and sometimes that's exactly what someone needs to hear when they're facing a similar situation. If you'd like to hear more real stories about real people standing up for themselves with quiet dignity and strength, please subscribe to the channel. I've got many more to share, and your presence here means more than you know. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment and tell me what town or country you're in, and if you've faced something similar, someone trying to control your life or take your home. Please know you're not alone. You have every right to fight back. If you'd like to support the channel, there are ways to do that, but please don't feel any pressure. Just you being here listening to this old woman's story, that's more than enough. Take care of yourselves out there. Know your rights. Protect what's yours. Trust your own judgment, and remember, being older doesn't mean being incompetent. Choosing a simple life doesn't mean you need someone to manage it for you. Your life, your home, your choice. Until next time, this is Virginia wishing you the strength to stand your ground and the clarity to know when standing matters most. God bless you all.